you are in life right now, you might be going through or coming out of or heading towards some kind of transition. In fact, just to make sure we're all on the same page together, would you just raise your hand if you are coming out of, in the middle, or have gone through transition? Go ahead and raise your hand real high. Yeah, pretty much everyone, right? Yeah, and so what we want to do as we kind of kick off the new school year and as we kind of start into this new season of life is we want to take some time and pause and allow God's word to teach us a little bit about how to thrive in the midst of transition. How many of us can agree that life doesn't always go the way that we expect it? Life isn't always the way that we wanted it to go, and maybe even the reason why you're here in this room is because of an unexpected reality that you experienced in your life. Some things that we go through that are changes are things we look forward to and we're really excited about. Other things that we go through in our life are things that we hoped would turn out to be one way, and we end up being incredibly disappointed. I experienced that just recently. In fact, a couple of months ago, my wife and I took 7 people on a 1-month cross-cultural international trip to another country, to Costa Rica, to spend some time as a family. And we were going to bring some friends and family to fly in and visit us from time to time as we were able to get away and take some rest. And so spending a month abroad means that a hotel is just not an affordable option. I mean, the hotels are pretty expensive, especially when you've got the tribe that we have coming with us. And so we needed a place that had a couple of bedrooms, a couple of bathrooms, ideally a pool, so that we could just send our kids out there when we didn't feel like parenting. And maybe even beyond that, like a beach to kind of get away and relax. And so we went to this thing that God has created called Airbnb, which I, at this point, just do not believe in at all, right? Like if you don't believe in God, don't believe in Airbnb because it will let you down, all right? And so I went to, Airbnb. We researched. We found a place that we thought would be perfect. The title of it was Beachfront House. How many of us can say amen to a beachfront house, right? Like that's summer. And so we found this place. We evaluated it. We looked at all of the photos, and the place looked incredible. It was brand new on Airbnb. There were like not many reviews, and they weren't in a language that we understood. But this was a picture that we saw, and that picture that just felt like home to me, right? That just looked like home to me. You've got tile roofs, pool, beach behind it. It's like felt like a drug lord without actually being one. Just really excited about that being the potential place that we could stay. And so we booked it. We negotiated a price that was within our range, and we were just ecstatic about going. So we get on the plane, we fly in to Costa Rica, we get our car, that was a journey I'll tell you about later. Our kids are really hungry, and we want to have a great Costa Rican experience. So the first thing we do is we go to the drive-thru of a McDonald's and grab us some food, because nothing's more Costa Rican than eating McDonald's. And so we grab that meal, and then we head out on this 2.5-hour drive to go to our home for the month, our residence, our oasis in the Costa Rican coast. And as we're driving there, we kind of turn off some roads and we hit some dirt roads, and we start going to some places that don't look, very North American. And I called the Airbnb guy, and he's like, "Hey, you're close." We tell him where we are. Then he says, "All you have to do is cross over the railroad tracks." And anytime you hear cross over the railroad tracks, it should give you some cause for concern. And so we pull into this place that we're staying at. And remember, the photos looked incredible. The write-up said, air conditioning, hot water, everything you could want to have, beachfront house. We pull into this place. We meet the guy who owns the house. He's an incredibly nice man, and he begins to give us a tour of the place. It's about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. It's hot and it's sticky, and we walk into the house, and I just noticed like swarms, like massive swarms of insects and mosquitoes kind of flying through the bottom of the house. And it's a little bit hotter than I expected. And then it hits me, there's no air conditioning on the bottom floor at all right? Not only that, there are places on the bottom floor, feet of, multiple feet, 15, 20 feet of space where there are no windows at all. It's just steel bars, all right? It's like my 2-year-old's putting his head out through it, like, is this prison? It is pretty intense. And so there's no AC on the bottom floor, even though the write-up said that there was AC. Then the stairs that go up to the second floor, they're spiral staircase with no banister on the second floor. I've got two kids, 2 and 1. That's just like, a death trap waiting to happen. They could fall over. I mean, there's literally nothing to stop them from falling over. Then he takes us to the bathroom. He turns the water on, and he says, in Costa Rica, we take ambient showers. Ambient is a tricky way of saying there's no hot water heater. It's going to be cold showers for a month, all right? Yeah. And I'm like, this ain't a mission trip, mate. This is vacation, all right? So then we go downstairs, go to the pool. The pool's nice. Then we go out to the beach, and the beach has broken bottles all over it, glass all over it, nothing like the photos. The water is unsafe. He said, yeah, just so you know, you cannot swim in the water here. It's not safe. It's unhealthy, and many people have died. But you can start a bonfire here as long as there is no wind, but be careful because if there is wind, the fire could catch the other shanties on fire next to you, and that would be really bad for all of us, wouldn't it? And I was like, yeah, that would not be a great way. Pastor imprisoned for arson, not going for that at all. 6.5 hours later, we eventually get to a point where we have a conversation, multiple conversations with Airbnb. In fact, let me just throw this out here so you can empathize with me for a minute. We call Airbnb and say, hey, the photos are not in alignment with what we said or what we signed up for. And they said, great, we'll try and figure out a solution for you. And we're like, great, thanks, Airbnb. We go an hour and a half, get a phone call, and this is where they start negotiations with us. We understand that this place was not up to your expectations. The owner would like to make your stay better by providing at no cost to you citronella candles and mosquito repellent. So moral of the story, don't book with Airbnb, let's pray. No, that's not it. But here's the truth, all right? Here's the truth, okay? If you and I are just honest for a minute, life isn't always like the pictures. Would we agree? Life is not always the way that we expect it to be. We've got one vision of the way that life is going to be. Maybe we even, communicate a certain vision of our life to people on social media. But the fact of the matter is that life isn't always like the pictures. It's filled with transitional moments in our life that maybe we expect it to happen and are looking forward to. But for many of us, it's filled with transition moments that we did not expect or were not looking forward to. And regardless of whether or not you're looking forward to transition or you are not at all, the reality in psychology will tell you this, is that every time you go through change in your life, every time there's a transition, with that transition comes the annoying little brother, stress. It always shows up. And if you're going through transition right now, or if you've just come out of transition, or you're heading into a transition, with that comes the reality of stress. And so over the next couple of weeks, what I want to do is simply ask this question and allow God's word to teach us, how do we thrive in transition? Is there a way to not just keep our head above water in the midst of transition, but actually find our souls and our life and the people around us thriving? And so I want to ask you this question as we jump in today to make this series as practical as possible for every single one of us. It's this: where are you in transition? Maybe for some of us, it's the fact that it's a new school. Maybe you've moved into the area and you're starting school tomorrow or sometime this week, or you made a change in the schooling situation. Or maybe you're the parent of a kindergartner. It's their first day of actual school. You're dropping them off tomorrow and you're not sure if you're going to survive until 9 a.m. because your little baby's running away and they're going to go to kindergarten and then graduate and then get married and leave you forever. Maybe that's how you're feeling right now. Maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's why you moved to Lake Nona. It's because of the new job, or because something happened in your organization and you got transitioned to a new job, or you no longer have a job and you're in between jobs, and that's the transition that you're in. Maybe it's a new baby. Maybe you're in this process where you either want to have another child, or you've already, gone through that process and now the child is on the way and you're feeling the weight and the stress of a new kid. I love, people ask me, what's it like having 4 kids? And, by 3, you've probably got it figured out, right? 4, not that big of a deal. You're just kind of adding to the chaos. And I'm reminded of the comedian Jim Gaffigan when someone asked him, what's it like having 4 kids? And he said, imagine that you're drowning with 3 kids and someone throws you a baby. That's what it's like. And maybe that's the transition that you're walking through right now. Maybe it's a new move. Maybe you've moved to Lake Nona, or you're moving out of the community and you're feeling some emotion around that. Maybe it's a new church. Maybe the new move has actually meant that you've got to find a new church and you're here with us now trying to figure that whole thing out. And it's not the same people and you're just navigating the transition and change. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe a new one that you've entered into or one that you've had to walk away from and you're feeling the pain of that. Maybe the thing that's next for you is an empty nest, like this is the senior year for your kid, then it's your last one, or you're sending them off to college and you're beginning to kind of look around and realize life is about to be different. Just hug the parent of a kindergartner and tell them it's a lot longer than you think, And then the last one, retirement, maybe that's it for you. Maybe the big transition isn't something that's happening right now, but it's what's coming up, and you just got to get prepared and get ready for it. Whatever the transition is that you're walking through, I want you to be thinking about it as we're in the course of this series, because I think that God has some specific things to say directly to you. But before we even jump in, I want us to acknowledge something that might be hard for us control freaks like me, but is important for us to just acknowledge about our life. Which is this: we can't always plan for what's next, but we can prepare for it. I mean, if we're all honest, we had plans about how our life was going to be, and now we're sitting at Nona Church on a Sunday morning, and that was not necessarily part of the plan 20 years ago, right? If you were to ask 14-year-old me, what is the plan? It was, go to the NBA, right out of high school, get drafted by the Lakers, have an afro. That didn't work out. In fact, my hair's going the opposite way, right? Make a lot of money, right? And then get married and have lots and lots and lots of children. I got that part figured out, but the rest of the plan is a mess. In fact, this is so true. I want us all to say it out loud because we need to let it resonate in our hearts. Maybe even write it down in your notes. Say this with me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. We can't always plan for what's next, but we can prepare for it. Because here's the thing. Plans assume something. They assume that control is possible. And preparation admits that it isn't. In fact, that's what we do when we pack our bag for a trip, right? We might have plans, but the reality is we pack our bags in preparation for the things that may happen that we don't even know about. Like if you go on a trip with me, right? I'm bringing as many of these things as I can find. These are diapers, all right? I'm bringing as many of these as I can find because I want to be prepared for whatever might happen with my kids. I'm also bringing one of these things. I'm bringing an iPad with me, an indestructible iPad, because you know what? I need this thing downloaded with as many movies as possible, Thomas the Trains as possible, My Little Ponies as possible, live sports for me as possible, because I can't trust that the Wi-Fi is going to work on the airplane, and the last thing I need are my screaming kids with nothing to distract them, right? So I'm making sure I've got that packed. How many of us know that you're packing a charger to be prepared, right? I've never met a teenager that doesn't have one of these. It's like if I don't have a charger, just find somebody who's got acne. They've got one with them, right? The other thing, right, that you've got to have, right, as you're packing is you got to have some snacks. You got to have some snacks. The night that we were at this house, right, the house in the neighborhood that shall not be named, the night that we were there, I called a buddy of mine. He's a missionary in Costa Rica. And I was like, hey, mate, I need to find dinner for my kids. And he's like, where are you staying? And I told him, and he said, oh, no. You can't leave there. It's not safe. People that live in Costa Rica don't go where you're living. You're going to have to stay home. It'd be better that you don't eat than try and go and get food. So you know what my kids had for dinner? I was prepared and bought one extra box of chicken nuggets at McDonald's 5 hours before. We took that 10-piece, divided it among 4. Emma got an extra nugget because she's the oldest seniority, right? And we gave them that plus as many of these little things that we packed. We were prepared, and that was what my kids ate for dinner. You can judge my parenting later. You were not in the circumstance I was in, all right? But here's the deal. We pack to prepare. Like you pack an extra pair of clothes and toiletries in your carry-on just in case your bags don't make it to your destination or your flight gets delayed. We don't always just pack for what the plan is. We pack to be prepared. We pack our bags with the expectation of preparation. And in this series, Pack Your Bags, what we want to talk about are the things that we bring along with us in our journey that help prepare us for what's next, whatever what's next might be. Because here's the truth. Thriving in transition isn't about having a plan for every situation. It's about preparation. And I want us to talk about today one thing that I think is so important, the starting point really to this process of thriving in transition, which is this, that thriving in transition is about a mindset. It starts with the way that we think. And to help us out, we're going to look at a piece of scripture that I think is so powerful, that's been preserved over thousands of years. People have died trying to make sure that we would be able to have access to these words today. And what I love about our faith, and maybe you're not a Christian, you're unsure about Christianity or any of that stuff. What I love about our faith is that regardless of where you land in following Jesus, what we're talking about today, if you apply to your life, I believe will make your life better and ultimately will just be more proof that God is who he says he is, and we can find wisdom through his word that is given to us. And so over the next couple of 3 weeks, we're going to be studying the book of Joshua, really looking at Joshua chapter 1. And today, we're going to talk about the mindset that we need when we thrive in transition. And we're going to read Joshua 1 and 2, and then I'm going to look at Joshua's life today and leave you with a principle that I think is valuable for all of us. Here's how the story goes in Joshua 1, verses 1 and 2. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. Now stop there, okay? We got to give you a couple of characters that we're talking about. The first one is this man named Moses. All right, Moses is a really big deal. He's such a big deal, he had a movie made after him called The Prince of Egypt, all right? Guy's a really big deal. And Moses went into Egypt and helped deliver out of captivity the people of Israel who had been enslaved for 400 years. This man's got a rod and a staff. When he throws it on the ground, it turns into a snake. He walks up to the Red Sea. He plants that thing into the ground. The ocean parts, and they walk right through it. Moses is a man with God's hand on his life. And for 40 years, he's been leading the people of Israel. Up to 2, if not 4 million people have been following his leadership. And we find in this text that Moses, one of the greatest men that has ever lived, has died. And his assistant, the intern, Joshua, is about to get the greatest, biggest promotion of his life that he did not see coming. Here's what we see. God says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving them to the people of Israel. Joshua, the assistant to Moses, steps into the biggest shoes in history at that time and has the responsibility of taking millions of people across the Jordan River into the promised land that God has set aside for his people. But it's not like this land is going to be easy, because there are tons of tribes that hate the people of God, and the walk that Joshua's about to walk is going to be very challenging and very, very difficult. The guy got a massive promotion, but I'm not sure if the pay and the benefits were commensurate, if you get what I'm saying. The guy's got a lot on his shoulders and big shoes to fill. If there is anyone who understands the weight and the pressure and the stress of transition, it is Joshua. Joshua didn't know what Joshua didn't know. Much like me and much like you. Because if we're honest, we don't know what we don't know either. Is that not the case? But Joshua, this assistant to Moses, Joshua, this young man that's about to step into some of the biggest shoes of all time, to lead one of the greatest changes of all time, literally establishing a nation from scratch, has been prepared for this moment in ways he never even knew he was prepared. And this is the mindset of the person who thrives in transition. I want you to write it down. This is the mindset that I have to have and that we have to have if we're going to thrive in the midst of the changes we're experiencing in our life. Here's what it is. Write it down. God is, and has been. God is and has been preparing you for every transition you will face. God is and has been preparing you for every transition you will face. Today, what we're going to do is look at the life of Joshua. Not at Joshua chapter 1 when he becomes the leader, but the Joshua before. The Joshua the assistant. The Joshua, the intern, the Joshua, the warrior, who did not know what he did not know, but God knew all of the time what he was doing in his life to prepare him for the moment that was going to come. We're going to look at Joshua, the young man, Joshua, the young assistant, and see that God was preparing him in advance for the work that Joshua never knew God was preparing him for. And may I submit to you that God has been preparing you in advance for the work you're about to step into, and that everything you need, God has already allowed you to pack in your bags. Here's the first thing God is preparing us through. God is preparing us through, write this down, our experiences. God is preparing us through our experiences. There's a story in Exodus chapter 17 that goes this way. The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning, but whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Now stop. This is an incredible story, is it not? When Moses' hands go up, everyone who's fighting for Israel is finding victory. When his hands get tired, they begin to lose. And so they find a solution to keep his hands up. And this text tells us that Joshua, who's in the valley, Joshua who doesn't know what's going on behind him, Joshua who doesn't know why he's winning, just thinks he's fighting a battle like every other battle, doesn't know that there is supernatural power behind him that is sustaining him. So the Lord says to Moses something incredibly powerful that I want us to catch. He says this to Moses, write what happened, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered. And listen, make sure that who? 1, 2, 3. Joshua hears it. Oh man, this is good stuff. Because God wasn't just sending Joshua into the battle so that Joshua could fight a battle. God was sending Joshua into the battle to create a memory in Joshua's life so he would know for the future battles where his power and strength comes from. It comes from God and from God alone. This is massive. Think about it. Joshua's going to walk the people of God in the promised land. They get to this little town called Jericho. And they can't figure out how to break through the walls. And somebody would say, why don't we march around it 7 times? How many of us are not signing up for that because that sounds like an embarrassing way to lose? But what gives Joshua the confidence to say, yeah, let's do something like walk around a place 7 times because God's going to give us victory? Because it was written in a scroll for him to remember that the reason why he won against the Amalekites when he was a young warrior was not because he was a great warrior, but because of the supernatural power of God that was behind him. And if the supernatural power of God that was behind him then is there, then will not the supernatural power of God be with him right now as he moves into the next transition? If you're going to clap, clap. That's good preaching, all right? And so I think for us, we've got to remember God uses our past experiences to strengthen us for our future reality. See, all of us have a scroll. You might be like, Collin, this is not a scroll. I know, it's back to school shopping. I thought it was cute. Leave me alone, all right? But all of us should have a journal, the things that God has done in our life in the past. Because when we don't feel confident, when we get shaken by the thing that's right in front of us, when the anxiety begins to cripple us around the transition that we're in, we need to remember what God has done in the past for us. We are walking and breathing today, not because we're awesome, but because God came through. And remembering those stories when God came through in our life, remembering the stories when God came through in the lives of the people that we love, those are the things that allow us to thrive in the midst of transition. So I want you to pack your bags. I want you to write down and remember moments of God's faithfulness in your life. This is an incredibly practical way for you to put into practice what we're talking about today. You want to have a mindset of thriving in the midst of transition. Begin the process of writing down and recounting all of the ways in which God has been faithful to you. Something powerful about having a worn out Bible with all of these prayers etched in the margins, where you can go back and see where God answered. There's something powerful, even about the process of scrapbooking. I make fun of my wife because to me, there's nothing more suburban than scrapbooking, right? I'm like, you're such a suburban mom. And she's like, you drive a Toyota Camry, come on, right? And the reality is that while that's the case, what we have as a family is we can go back and see time again that God has been faithful. We carry our stories with us in a transition, and those stories become the ammunition we need to fight against the enemy when he says that we're not going to make it. No, God has been faithful in the past. He will be faithful today, and he will be faithful in the future. Here's the second thing. God is preparing us not only through our experiences, but also through our relationships. See, Joshua just thought his job was to be the intern. Joshua just thought his job was to be Moses' assistant, but he had no idea that God was giving him access to relationships that were divine, access to relationships that were specific and necessary, that would equip him for what he would need in the future. We see this in Exodus chapter 24. Moses is about to go up to the mountaintop to interact with God and engage with God. And this is what we see in verse 12 and 13. You miss it if you're just reading the story, but I want you to see it. It says, the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there that I may give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction. So the big kind of meta narrative is God is going to meet with Moses for 7 days in a cloud of glory. And then for 40 days, they're going to have face-to-face conversation. That's the big story, right? But hidden in this little text are these words. So Moses rose with his assistant who? Joshua, and Moses went up into the mountain of God. Here's what's so big. Joshua, the assistant, would spend 7 days in the cloud of glory with Moses. And for 40 days, as God spoke face to face with Moses, guess who had a front row seat to that relationship? Joshua. Then we go to Exodus chapter 33, and God again interacting with Moses face to face. We see this. As Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. Whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance to the tent, they all stood and worshiped, each at the entrance to their tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. What a beautiful kind of literary device there. Then Moses would return to the camp, but look at this. His young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, a young man, would not leave the tent. It was Joshua who would experience the closeness that Moses had with God, not only on the mountaintop, but in the tent. And when Moses would walk out and it would seem like the presence of God would go, Joshua would sit and wait and hope that God would talk with him too, the way that he talked with Moses. And Joshua didn't know. He didn't know that serving as the assistant to Moses would be the environment that would give him the connection and the relationship he would need for his faith to be built. How much faith do you need to lead millions of people into a promised land when you're about to experience enemy attack day in and day out? You need a ton of faith. And that faith isn't going to just come by getting secondhand stories of how powerful God is. It's from the firsthand experiences that you got to see when you saw Moses walking with God. And Joshua didn't know that this is what God was doing and setting him up, but that's exactly where God was going. Hear me. God gives us specific relationships to prepare us for the next season. Like, you may not know this right now, but the people in your community group, if you're in a community group, might be the exact people God has given you to help you weather the storm of the next season that's coming that you don't even know about. That the person that you might interact with on a Sunday school class might be the wisdom that you need to get through the next season that you're not even worried about. That the message you're hearing right now that you don't even think is applicable to you, 13-year-old, may be the message you need 5 months from now when you're trying to go through a transition and you have no idea how to get out of it. God, in his sovereign plans and purposes, puts us around the right people at the right times in the right moments to give us exactly what we need to thrive and prepare us for the transition that's coming. The story of my life. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pack your bags. This is a picture frame that represents the relationships that are essential. I want you to invest this year in the relationships that draw you closer to God. For some of you, that means reorienting who your friendship circle is. For others of us, it means choosing to get in community group because doing this Christian walk by ourselves is not going to be enough. For some of our teenagers, it means taking the risk of jumping in to Nona students and hopefully finding friends like Asia said that she did so that you can have people to help navigate the craziness of school and innovation in Lake Nona Middle and Lake Nona High so that we can do this together. But we pack our bags when we invest in the right relationships in the right season that draw us closer to God. And if you don't have those relationships, we have a means by which you can get them. They're called community groups. And your next step today might be circling that part on your Connect card because today is the day to step into the new, fresh, God-giving relationships that God has prepared for you. So God's preparing us not only through our experiences, not only through our relationships, but also through this last one, which brings so much grace and hope to me through our mistakes. I am so grateful that I serve a God that doesn't look at my mistakes and simply say, I can't use you anymore because of those, but looks at my mistakes and says, I'm going to use you in spite of those and actually use those weaknesses as a leveraging point to do things that you otherwise could not do without me. So see what we see in Numbers chapter 11. There's a story where Joshua makes a mistake. And we look at it, and it's not going to seem like a big mistake to us, but it would be a big mistake to him, and it would be important for his leadership. Numbers 11 says this, 2 men remained in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the name of other Medad. I think they were both fathers. I don't know. And the Spirit rested upon them. Now they were among those listed, but who had not gone out to the tabernacle, yet they prophesied in the camp. So stop. Moses is so tired at this vignette of the story of Israel. He says, God, I need you to bring power, not just to me, but to a bunch of other people. I cannot manage all these people on my own. And so he says to gather the 70 leaders, the 70 elders around the tabernacle. And so a bunch of them arrive, except for these two, Eldad and Medad. They don't show up. They're probably doing dad things like being at a soccer game or something like that. And they don't make it to the tabernacle. And it says in that moment that the Spirit of God shows up in a powerful way and they all begin to prophesy, including Medad and Eldad, who were not at the tabernacle where they were supposed to be. Now Joshua, who's a rule follower, Joshua, who's passionate about Moses getting the credit, Joshua, who's faithful to Moses, is so upset at the fact that Eldad and Medad are able to prophesy, even though they did not do what Moses told them to do, that Joshua wants to defend Moses' reputation. So he says this, Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, one of his choice men answered and said, Moses, my Lord, forbid them. Don't let those guys prophesy. Don't let them do that because they didn't listen to you and they should have listened to you, Moses. And Moses rebukes him. He corrects him. He corrects him in front of a bunch of people. And he says this, are you zealous for my sake? Like Joshua, do you think this is about me? You think this is about my leadership? You think this is about my reputation? Oh, young Padawan, what you do not know. He says, oh, that all the Lord's people were prophets and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. See, Joshua, he made a mistake. He made an error in judgment. He thought it was about the leader when it was never about the leader. Joshua learned it's not about a leader. It's about God getting the credit. Do you know how valuable that lesson and mistake would be for Joshua as he would lead the people into the promised land? As people would want to elevate him on a pedestal and you say, no, it's not about the leader. It's about the God who's in control of all of this. How easy it would have been for him to get puffed up with pride at being the leader, but he learned on that day and kept the lesson close to him that it is not about me, but it's about what God is doing through me and through others. See, sometimes pop psychology tells us that what we really need to do is take our mistakes and take them out of the bag and pretend like they never happened. But the beauty of the gospel is that there is no mistake, there is no regret, there's no decision we have ever made that is so bad that God cannot forgive it and redeem it and use it for powerful means on his behalf. So I want you to pack your bags with this. I want you to see, and to just demonstrate that today I've got a camera, I want you to see your mistakes as God-given and opportunities for wisdom gained for what God has prepared next. Like, how many of us are grateful that there are not photos of all of our worst mistakes? Anybody grateful for that, right? Yeah, but here's the thing. You've got the camera, right? You know about those things. You know about the decision you made that you regretted. You know about the conversation you had that you shouldn't have had. You know about the financial move you made that was going to make you get rich quick and it just made you broke fast, right? You have all of those. And God says, hey, you don't have to pretend like those things are not a part of your life. No. Pack your bags with the mistakes you've made, because that will give you the wisdom for the next season you're in. I may not have ordained the mistake that you made, but I will redeem the mistake that you made and allow it to be profitable for you in your next season. So you don't have to pretend like it's not there. Leverage the mistake for wisdom gained and just watch how I'll use it in your life and maybe the life of the people around you. I love this proverb. It says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge. Discipline is packing your mistakes in your bag. But whoever hates correction is stupid. And I love this verse because it allows me to say the word stupid in church. But I think it's so poignant that for those of us that are willing to allow our mistakes to be owned by us and to reframe our life around living in wisdom, that person is the one who thrives in the midst of transition. It's the person who pretends like they didn't make mistakes and keeps on making the mistakes, who continually gets battered and bruised by the realities of transition in life. So here's the good news, is that Joshua was not God's plan B. It wasn't like Moses, God had a plan for Moses, and then because of Moses, God just had to find somebody else to do it. From the beginning of time, listen to me, from the beginning of time, God in his sovereign plan knew what he had purposed Joshua for. In fact, I'll talk a little bit more about that next week, but let me just explain something to you really quick that is so powerful. Moses represented the law, and the law could not deliver the people of Israel into freedom. Joshua's name means God saves, and it is only God that could deliver the people of God into freedom. It was the plan from the beginning that it would not be Moses, but Joshua in his sovereign plan, God who saves, who would bring the people out of captivity into freedom. And I want you to get this. Joshua was not God's plan B, and you are not his plan B either. If you are a mother of that child and you think, God, were you right in making that decision? You were plan A from the beginning of time. If you're the father of that wayward son, you were plan A from the beginning of time. If you're struggling to have kids and wish you could, God has a plan, and his plan is plan A from the beginning of time. If you're the owner of the business and you're trying to figure out how to make things work out, and you're wondering if this is what God's ever even made or designed you for, you are God's plan A from the beginning of time. If you're an educator and you walk into that classroom tomorrow overwhelmed by the realities that are in front of you, you are God's plan A from the beginning of time. You are God's plan A, and he makes no mistakes. And just like Joshua didn't know that he was fighting that battle, that it was God's preparation for the battles he would fight in the future. And just like Joshua didn't know that his relationship with Moses would be the outlet and the gateway that would allow him to experience God in deep ways, we don't know the relationships around us that God has given us right now to help us manage the change we're in and the changes that are coming. And just like we look back at our mistakes and regret and wish that we could throw them away and pretend like they never existed, God would say, I may not have ordained it, I may not have wanted that to happen to you, but I'm going to use and redeem every ounce that you give me, every ounce that you surrender me, to help you thrive, not only today, but every transition that is to come. So here's the bottom line for us today. Here's the mindset I want us to have as we enter into this series, Pack Your Bags. As we think about what it means to thrive in the midst of transition, the one we're looking forward to and the one we wish never happened. Trust in God's preparation. He's not going to bring you anywhere without preparing you to walk through it. He's not going to bring you anywhere without preparing the right people to be there with you. He's not going to bring you anywhere without giving you everything you need exactly when you need it, because he's that good of a God. So it may not be your plan, but God invites you to be prepared. It may not be your plan, but he's got a perfect plan. And he loves you more than you love yourself. And he knows you better than you know yourself. And he's for you more than you're even for yourself. So trust in his preparation.